And we are back. Here we are. It's After the Beat. Time to answer some of your questions. One question that I did not choose, it was asked by someone, but I didn't choose it because I thought we would get to it during the official show, was favorite UFC on Fox memory. Is there one that sticks out?
Well, that Nate Diaz fight will always...
The Michael Johnson one?
The Michael Johnson one. That will be up there. I was trying to think. I mean, it's hard to kind of like flash back through them all. But I mean, that first fight obviously was a big deal.
That was memorable, yeah. It felt like such a big deal.
Yeah, it felt like a big deal. And honestly, those two guys at that moment in time were like, it felt like the biggest heavyweight fight of all time.
Yep.
You know, so those two come to mind immediately.
I'm having a hard time thinking of a specific moment. I would say that's probably the biggest fight, you know, that it felt like a big deal. And the way the broadcast was made, you know.
Yeah.
First one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know about Fox or
Big
Fox?
Fox.
Big Fox, yeah.
Big Fox.
You know, it's interesting. It felt like it actually started to, I don't mean to be a negative Nancy here, but it felt like it started to change at UFC on Fox 3, because if you recall, UFC on Fox 2 was headlined by Rashad Evans against Phil Davis. Also, they had Chael versus Michael Bisping. And Weidman, Weidman took that fight on super short notice against Damian Maia, which was a really big deal for him. But
He
then,
cut like a ton of weight.
Yeah,
That was a big, I remember that, yeah.
But then UFC on Fox 3, all of a sudden, it started to get a little weird. You know, like it was Pat Barry versus LeVar Johnson, Nate Diaz versus Jim Miller, which didn't feel like a really big deal. Yeah, it just didn't feel. And then you remember UFC on Fox 4 was super weird, where they had that thing where it was like, whoever looks best of these light heavyweights is going to get a title shot. Machida Bader. There was Mike Swick fought on that one against Marcus Johnson, I think it was. It was just, like, the novelty wore off rather quickly. But there was, you know, I remember Gil Melendez against Benson Henderson.
Yeah, that was good.
Felt like a really big deal. Cormier fighting Frank Mir.
Yeah. You know, the problem
in San Jose.
That I can recall, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong if you remember this, but there was never that crazy fight that happened. There was not like one of those, you know the ones I'm talking about, like where just something so crazy where there's a narrative switch and everybody's paying attention and going, whoa. Yeah. I don't remember a single one of those on Big Fox, so that's kind of unfortunate. There was some that I thought had that potential, they just didn't materialize that way.
I mean, I would say for a second, Anthony Pettis, you know, he had a few fights good. When he fought Benson Henderson, was that on Fox?
No, it was UFC 164. The title fight?
164, yeah.
I don't really think, what did Anthony Pettis do so special on Fox?
I thought that Ben Henderson.
No, that was pay-per-view. That was in Milwaukee. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, he fought on FS1 and he had the Eddie Alvarez fight, but that didn't really go that great for him.
Yeah, it did.
Rose Namajunas, was she when she fought Paige Van Zandt, was that on Fox?
No, that was actually on Fight Pass.
Okay.
You guys are getting too old. What's with your memory? Jesus.
Fight Pass.
Yeah, that was.
What is that?
That was before UFC. I think it was 194.
I know. Yeah, I knew it was like the night prior because we were at Vegas, had 3 in a row. Yeah.
All right, let's move along to our questions. Not too many good memories. We'll get back to you on that.
Sad when you put it like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. With Tyron Woodley getting healthy, is the only fight to make with the interim champ. Suppose Till beats Wonderboy with a first-round KO. Does he jump the queue? We talked about this a little bit. Do you think he can jump the queue?
Man. Oh.
I mean, anything's possible in today's UFC, but I mean, you have an interim title fight. It just
defeats the purpose.
You kind of have to unify the belts at that point.
It defeats the purpose to have an interim title. If they're not, I mean, if that's even a possibility, they should just get rid of the interim tag. I mean, but the bottom line is, this is a big moment for Till, so I won't put anything past it. If he goes in there in his hometown, and like you were mentioning earlier on the earlier show, like Liverpool is in the right mood, and there's just, I mean, I could see him instantaneously taking 10 steps forward with a big victory in this.
Yeah, but if Covington wins, considering all the smack, they're not going to.
Yeah. No, they're not going to miss it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he's in this fight.
If it was Damian Maia and he won,
or RDA.
Yeah.
There isn't that history there.
That's true, RDA.
There's that history. So yeah, I think we all agree. You do an interim title fight, you would think that they're going to, but let's not forget, Robert Whittaker won the interim belt and he didn't get a title shot.
Exactly.
GSP got it. So.
But yeah, there was a super fight,
Sure.
implications there. So.
All right, let's move along to the next one. What else do we have? Caps or Knights?
Ooh.
Now, this is, of course, referring to the Stanley Cup final. Washington Capitals finally break through. They win Game 7 last night against Tampa Bay. If Luke were here, he'd be very happy. Maybe he's celebrating. Maybe that's why he's not here.
He was tilting last night, I think.
Yeah. He was out
That's why he's
partying.
not here.
And of course, the Vegas Golden Knights. Danny, I know you're a big hockey aficionado.
I'm a huge hockey fan.
Who you got?
I'm just gonna go with the Knights because it's a great storyline.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't really.
Are
have
you
a
even
huge
familiar with the story? You understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. You're,
Ice hockey?
yeah.
So I'm all in. I always root for the underdogs.
Yeah.
Whenever I don't have a favorite, right, I always go for whoever is the underdog. So, for example, in this case, I'm not really I would say I'm going back to soccer. I'm not a huge fan of Liverpool, and I'm not a huge fan, obviously, of Real Madrid. But just given the fact that they're underdogs, I'll root for them. So in
Who's
this
them?
case,
Liverpool?
Liverpool, yeah.
Right.
So in this case, you have a pretty great storyline, and I love great storylines.
Yeah.
Will you even watch a minute of action?
I'll watch it, sure.
You will. Okay. Have you ever been to a live hockey game?
I did. I saw the Panthers play. I don't even remember
One of
who.
those teams.
Yeah.
But it was
fun, right?
I didn't think it was too fun, but I think that game was from the people that I was with and I talked to. That game was pretty bad.
Pretty bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Chuck, you're a big
I'm
hockey
the
guy,
man in
right?
the hat. I'm going for the Caps.
Why?
The Caps. The man in the hat.
Oh, that's
Right.
right.
No, I'm kidding. But honestly, when I look at
That one
when I
went
look
right over
when I think about these types of things, I'm kind of with you on fan base. I like fan bases. So like in the situations where your team, I'm a Colorado Avalanche fan, my team is gone. But you then look at the longest suffering fan bases. I'm always kind of partial to those teams.
Yeah.
And I guess given that Vegas, it's a great story. No matter who wins, I feel like it's going to be a cool story. But given that Vegas can't really truly appreciate what they're going through, like if they hoist that cup and they have no suffering to release, they have nothing, no generational memories of their grandfather who never got to see it and things like that. I go with the Caps because I feel like those people have been long suffering.
Yeah, that's fair. Ovechkin too.
Yeah, and then
the greatest
yeah,
players
exactly.
to ever, win the cup. It does feel like the NHL wins either way here, right?
100%. I mean, Tampa Bay was the one. Kind of monkey wrench. Even with Nashville and all those teams, they were kind of the one you're like, don't get Tampa Bay. Because they have won it too, like 10 years ago or so. No offense to their fan base, but I was like, any of those other teams were kind of new blood in there and stuff, and it was going to be a good story. Winnipeg would have been really cool.
To it. Yes, Winnipeg would have been great. But yeah, I'm all about the Knights.
Yeah.
Also because I don't really want DC to celebrate anything because they stole my baseball team. But
that's a good point.
Yeah, I just can't stand
This
them.
stuff runs deep
I
for you, man.
cannot stand them. But the Knights, just such a great story. I got an opportunity to go to a game with Sean Al-Shadi in March prior to UFC 222. If you have an opportunity to go to one of those games, if you're ever in Vegas for a fight and they're playing, check them out because they do a great job.
I was just in Nashville for the Avalanche of this playoffs, and
that's
I will
right.
say that.
Did you drink out of a catfish?
No.
No.
It's a great app. I love playoff hockey for the reason that it just tilts so fast. The action is, every little mistake can capitalize and boom, it's over. It's just the whole thing. And that was a fun atmosphere to see. Just they got.
You guys win that one?
No, they absolutely lost that game. It was a good game though, 5-4.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there you have it. Knights, doesn't care, and Caps. But leaning towards
I'll be
Knights.
watching. Yeah.
Okay. Cares but doesn't care.
Yeah. All right. Let's move along. Next one. Do you prefer watching MMA live in person or on the telly? Danny?
Both pros and cons, but I would say more on television. It's just more comfortable. You see better, right? You get a better angles, different angles as well. You don't have the cage in front of you. And I've sat in Media Row, which is right in front of the cage too. And I've also gone as a fan like years back and sat in some decent seats. I think everyone should go to a UFC event and experience live MMA just for the atmosphere, and it definitely you get a different feel of it. But as far as if I'm gonna sit there 7 hours of fights, if I've already been to live UFC events, probably go with television.
If it's a big fight, and you know this too, it's like you cannot replicate it on television. It's like if you're in the crowd for a big time fight, there's something electric about the air, and it's almost connective. And I don't know how to explain this exactly, especially in a place like Las Vegas where there's a lot of money in play, like people are betting on it. So there's all this kinds of hysteria in that walkout and on the music, and just everything is enhanced. And if it's a situation like that, there's really no beating being at the live event, wherever you could be in the rafters, it doesn't matter. I think being in the building for something like that is it's amazing. But on whole, like for normal cards, I mean, I'll always take television because you can see everything. There's a lot you miss in person, even at press row and things, because you have to kind of crane your neck to see the screen when the posts are there. There's camera people.
And the commentary always helps.
I know people are like, complaining about sitting ring cage side of the fight. But I mean, honestly, when you're trying to cover it and you're writing about it or you're running some kind of record of it, it's just easier to watch it. You see everything clearly on television.
There are oftentimes, where I never even stepped foot in the arena. I just watched the entire card.
On the back.
Yeah. And I agree with everything you said.
Funny.
Like there's just nothing like being there and feeling that atmosphere. But if you actually want to watch the fight and see all the angles and truly take in what is going on in the actual fight, and you don't care about the atmosphere, 100% there's a better vantage point on television. It's funny, we were just talking about hockey. I would say that hockey's like the most extreme in terms of TV to live viewing experience. I think it is that much better live as it is on television. And I would almost argue that MMA is the opposite. I feel like every MMA fan, UFC fan should go at least once, twice, 3 times. But if you're truly looking for the best vantage point, I think it's on TV. Cage. Now, if it was in a ring, it's a little different. Ring is like, I was sitting up close for the Lomachenko fight. That was tremendous. But if you're sitting that close for an MMA fight, for a UFC fight, with the way the cage is raised, and then you have cameramen in your face, you've got a photographer in your face, it's very hard to, you're often looking at the screen.
Yeah. Rugliata's always going right by you.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Dan, you're just too big. You're just too big. All right, let's move along.
One of my favorite things is when you said you're in there. Nowadays, you're back with the scrums and all that. But back in the day when you were doing interviews and stuff, you'd always be standing there in the hall watching some monitor.
Oh,
that was
the screen was this big.
I know.
It was like you're all huddled around. It was like 1960s.
And you're always wearing like a poodle shoes or something. Yeah, it's like pink shoes with wings or something, like a couple of times.
Pink shoes, it was one time.
Well, there was one time for that.
Poodle,
but there was, I was saying, like, you had a streak there where
those were the good old days.
Yes.
The old Fox days. Yes. All right, let's move along to our next question. Thoughts on whether or not it's time for UFC to increase its bonus amounts? Figures based on time when company had a fraction of the current value. I thought this was a very interesting take that I hadn't heard of. These numbers, 50, 60K, this has been in place for a long time. Is it time that they up the ante? 100K. One thing we didn't talk about earlier was, and it's almost like at this point you give up, but we had said in the 2 years leading up to this moment, if the fighters don't realize that they should be owed at least 50% of this, like they are in the NFL, what more could we say at this point?
Just 1.5 billion. What are they going to do with 750 million?
How those fighters did not sit and look at that number.
How many people are on roster?
Around 400.
I mean, that translates, just doing the rough math, is over $1 million per, That's ridiculous. But anyways.
So anyway, is this where they benefit from? I don't know. But
maybe, because you keep seeing these figures, right? Like, that the UFC sold for a certain amount, but now they're recouping that money. So it's been a process of seeing if the new owners are going to be able to recoup. I'd say this is a nice moment for the owners to have this feather in the cap, the ESPN deal. Maybe it is time for something like that. 50 grand is a lot for some people. Yeah. There are certain fighters where I'm sure it's nice, but it's not a lot of money.
Sure.
So, and I mean, that's when you're talking about a professional sports game, especially on ESPN now, because what they're talking about salaries of guys who are making $20 million a year and things like this constantly. 50 grand seems a little bit, a little bit silly in a lot of ways. So maybe you get that to 6 figures or something. I mean, you'd like to see something like that. I'd always love to see the fighters have a little more incentive in there.
Yeah, I'm always down for fighters getting more money, right? So of course, I think it should be brought up. When was the last time they? Because I know, for example, Frankie Edgar was talking about how like bonuses at one point were 10,000. When was the last time it got brought up? Do you know?
You mean it increased?
Yeah, the bonuses.
There was a time within the last
like.
decade it went from 50 to 60,
okay.
But honestly,
wasn't it UFC 100 or something when they did $100,000 bonuses?
That was big time, yeah, that was big time.
But I mean, it feels like they could do that again. But then again, I'm sure the new ownership is not exactly thrilled to go throw money around.
Right. Well, that's the thing that people bring up all the time. It's like, look, it sold for $4.025 billion. Yeah. They should be, but they're the ones who bought it for that much.
Right, exactly.
They spent the money.
Yes,
yeah.
Now they want to see return. They don't want to just dish out more money.
Yes, yeah. This is when they actually try to.
It'd be nice if it goes up 20,000, get to 70 or something. More money to the fighters.
That would be nice. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it would be nice. But yeah, I'd like to know. I saw Brian Kelleher, our friend Brian Kelleher, write something like, "Could I get $1 million of that?" That was one of the few tweets that I saw in terms of reaction. Most people, I think, were just happy about the exposure, which they're right.
Yeah.
But you just look at any other sport and they get a piece of the pie. That's what makes the deal even better.
Yeah.
It's 1.5 billion for 5 years, and they don't have to share it.
True.
What a life. All right.
Just writing about that, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Let's move along to our next question. With the Mauro Ranallo documentary coming out tomorrow, I want to know, what are each of your favorite documentaries?
Ooh.
By the way, I said it a million times on Monday. I could not recommend the Mauro the documentary enough. The interview was great, but I'm not going to be the one to recommend it. The documentary premieres Friday, May 25th, so this Friday, on Showtime at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. It's funny, he's actually going head-to-head with his documentary because he'll be calling Bellator.
London.
On Paramount Network, but I couldn't. Have you guys seen the documentary?
No, I have not.
Just the clips.
It's
just
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I just saw the Mask documentary, which I thought was really good, produced by Bobby Razik. Those are MMA documentaries. Smashing Machine is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Are they talking about MMA? Or
No, they aren't. They aren't. I was just kind of bringing that up. But yeah, favorite documentaries. I might be putting you on the spot here, but
Reggie against the Knicks. It's a 30.
stop it with that.
Did you see that one, by the way?
Of course I saw it.
All right.
I've actually seen it like 10 times just because.
Of course, that footage is awesome.
But
that series was
breaks
awesome.
my heart.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to think about that for just a second. I mean, there's the 30 for 30s are always so good.
Yeah.
If you're talking about sports documentaries, if you're just talking about documentaries, I mean, I didn't have to really think about that because there's been a lot of good ones. I mean, that are actual documentaries. I don't know, but there's nothing that jumps to mind that I'm like, oh, that separates from the rest.
I mean, yeah, there's so many good documentaries. If I were to go just MMA, I'd say Choke. Probably most people have seen it. That's a great documentary. And then just in general, I can just name a few. I don't know if you guys have seen Exit Through the Gift Shop.
Love that one.
There was a great documentary about Banksy.
That was a really good one. About Banksy.
What was it about?
Yeah.
Banksy, the
Street artist.
Oh, yes.
But not only about him.
Yeah, it's not only about him.
That was actually a good one. I forgot about that one.
That's what I like about that one, because it's like, it says, like, because Banksy has always been like this mysterious figure, and like it actually said a lot about him.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really about him. It was more about
Mr. Sunshine?
Mr. Brainwash.
Mr. Brainwash.
That was his name.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good documentary. There's another really good documentary called The Wolfpack. It's on Netflix.
What's it about?
It's about this like family that they had. I think it was like 7 kids, and they grew up in New York, but the dad wouldn't let the kids go outside of the apartment, so they stayed.
Jeez.
So they were homeschooled, and it's like
depressing.
Yeah, it's a crazy documentary. It's here in New York City. I mean, most documentaries are kind of wild, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess not. What was one? Super Size Me. I guess that was wild. The one where he ate McDonald's for a month.
That one sprung to mind too, but it was almost because it was so different than
it was great.
Just making yourself.
I remember seeing that in theaters. You guys ever see Beyond the Mat?
No.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Beyond the Mat, what is it?
It's about the pro wrestling industry.
Okay.
And WWE gave them phenomenal access, but it wasn't just about WWE.
I'd be interested in that.
Oh, I really recommend. That's one of my favorites ever. I took I think she was 8 years old, my sister, to that one. She had no idea what was going on.
Wow.
Also, Wrestling with Shadows, another great documentary about Bret Hart and his demise in WWE. So those ones come to mind as well. The 30 for 30s were great. The one about Wayne Gretzky getting traded from the Oilers to the Kings, King's Ransom. That's a really good one. That's one of my favorites.
What about Hating Christian Laettner?
Yes, I Hate Christian Laettner, one of my favorites. Yeah, that was a great one.
That's somebody who shows up in that one frequently.
Yes, how nice was that? Our friend Rory Karp hooked me up with that. Also, the Fab Five one was a great one. Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yes, I did see that.
I'd love to see the HBO documentaries come back. Little known fact, I worked in the documentary department for HBO in 2004. And let me tell you, making a documentary is no walk in the park.
I can't imagine.
It's very hard work.
Imagine.
Yeah. 1985 Villanova Georgetown championship game, and also the 1999 Women's World Cup team.
You helped on those?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was a PA, a production assistant. I had to log all the footage, like by minute. So you watch all the games, and it was painstaking.
How far he's come.
Yeah, look at me now. All right, let's move along to our next one. Here we go, just a couple left. From an MMA hardcore perspective, what would be more impressive, Khabib beating GSP or beating Askren? Now, hardcore.
Beating Askren?
Yeah.
I think it still has to be GSP. I know Ben Askren, he's a very skilled fighter, but we have yet to see him against those names. We've seen GSP, you know, fight legends and fight great fighters, you know, for such a long time now that it definitely has to feel more, not only from I guess from a hype perspective, just because he has a bigger name, but skill-wise, I think so too.
It's funny because you say the operative word there is diehard, right? If you're saying from a hardcore, so it's like if you think of it from like what resonates more, obviously GSP, because you're like, well, this guy has his legacy, he hasn't lost in how many years. But if you look at it from strictly like a wrestling dominant, you know, hardcore mentality, you think, man, nobody's even competed with Ben Askren. You imagine those two guys in MB. I'd still go with GSP, but it's actually a little bit of a more tricky question than it seems.
Yeah. Initially, you're kind of like, oh, this is a no-brainer. I'd go with GSP still. He still has that prestige, right?
You just don't see him,
especially if it's a dominant win.
You don't see him look vulnerable in the dictation of where the fight takes place. You may see him vulnerable in getting hit a little bit, or you know, getting beat up a little bit. But generally speaking, the way that Khabib wins is dictating where the fight is going to go.
Imagine if he could
GSP never gets dictated to that way. You know what I mean? Or very rarely.
That's very impressive.
I go with GSP.
But both very impressive.
Yes, of course. Interesting question. Okay, let's move along. What else do we have, my friends? What's going to happen to EBI and Invicta once UFC ESPN deal begins? My understanding is that they're going to remain, and that's going to be the appeal of having Fight Pass. If you are a hardcore fan, you want to still watch Invicta, Cage Warriors, EBI, Polaris, things like that, you get Fight Pass. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there is a market for that stuff. If they can get as many of those promotions, they also have Glory, they have the Glory prelims. There's a home for that, I think.
If you're a hardcore MMA fan.
Or combat sports.
Combat sports.
Who knows? Whenever Zuffa Boxing decides to start up, that could be a home. It might not be UFC Fight Pass, but if it's just Fight Pass, I feel like there's still some value. If it's priced the same, again, if it's priced $5 extra here in the United States, I would keep it.
I think Invicta ends up with Fox. And
imagine that. That would be interesting.
That's actually one that we didn't think of.
Yeah. That's interesting, Chuck. Could you imagine? Wow.
Well, that's the only one that has some kind of separate appeal, which would be...
That's brilliant.
Yeah. I've had a couple of brilliant ideas. I feel pretty good about that.
I like that. Could you imagine you got... Well, the thing is, SmackDown is going to probably be on Big Fox based on the reports. So it's not like anyone can really piggyback off of that.
True.
But if you sort of pair them up and you promote the fact that on FS1 at 11 o'clock after SmackDown, there's, an hour or two of Invicta, something there.
Yep.
Or 7 hours if they want to fill that hole. That's good. That's good, Chuck. Push that. Man. All right, let's go to our next one. This is actually from a former MMA commissioner in Massachusetts. How about that? I can't read his name because I am not wearing my glasses.
Joseph
Krowski?
Yes, but I did look him up and it is accurate.
Okay.
Excessive weight cutting is detrimental to fighter health and safety and is the cause of many fights being canceled due to a fighter's inability to make weight. Is the UFC addressing this issue? Do you guys feel like they're doing enough these days? I feel like UFC? Slowly but surely, yes, the UFC. We've seen situations where Gilbert Burns is pulled. We also saw a situation where Mackenzie Dern wasn't pulled. Right. So, it's still not quite there, but I do feel like they are getting a little more cautious, a little smarter.
That's the way it seems to me.
But we're also, it's so interesting. Chuck Liddell was in studio last week, and he was talking about, I hear things about, Uriah Hall having a heart attack, and they're like, you never heard that in my day. Now, way more UFC fights these days, but it is amazing how you're hearing a lot more about these scary stories than you were back then. Maybe you guys are just a little more open about it. So I don't know why that is, but I will say, on the whole, the UFC is, at least from this side of the table, doing a little more to try to prevent these incidents. It does always feel like we're dodging bullets left and right, and we're on the cusp of some real tragedy happening. And if that would happen, I mean, can you imagine a fighter dying as a result of the
IVs
UFC?
And things like that? I think that there's just the way you could cut weight and get what you could do before is a lot different than what you're able to do now.
That is a very good point. That is a very good point.
But it just seems to be, there's also a bigger spotlight on it. And I feel like we see it a lot more. And I do feel like at least the UFC is erring to the side of caution more than they used to, which is a positive thing. But we talked about this for the last few years, but I keep wondering when this will become the biggest story in MMA. At some point, if there's a death or something, this becomes a bigger story than it's been. A lot of people don't want to have to think about what happens before a fight. They just want to tune in for the fight. So they're not thinking about these, what these guys are putting themselves through.
You also wonder about, the early weigh-ins and whether that ultimately has been good or bad, because they're still arriving at the same time. They're still checking in, but it does seem like, for whatever reason, the fact that they're weighing in from 9 to 11 or so local time gives them less time, whether it's, you have to wake up early, you're not timing it correctly, as opposed to if you're weighing in at 3 or 4. Now, on the back end, they're having more time to rehydrate, which is a good thing, but they're not rehydrating with the help of IV. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a right answer here.
Yeah, I think the UFC has taken measures, just checking the fighters' weight, making sure they're within a certain percentage, pulling burns, as we know. But I think it ultimately comes down to the fighters. Like, you can only police so much, because then what comes after that? Like, going into the camps and checking people's weights. I mean, and I don't have any statistics on this, but I would say that the average size of each weight class has probably increased. You'd see smaller guys like, fighting, well, especially because there was less weight classes, right? You'd see a lot of 55ers not being real 55ers, but yeah, you see a lot of guys trying to push that weight and make that weight class, and it's hard to police guys,
They have the PI now, and imagine if every card they brought 3 to 4 nutritionists. Let's say they brought 3 or 4, and you've got 12 fights on a card, 24 fighters, and they just said, each nutritionist is going to oversee 6 fighters on this card. I feel like there's a way to do a little more in terms of making sure these men and women are not only coming in at the right weight, but also then doing the right thing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And they have, they provide snacks afterwards and things like that. But it does feel like, especially with the PI, you could take it one step. And I know it costs money to do that, but do they want a death on their hands? Do they want a serious injury? No. And they also don't want fights falling through at the last second, Max Holloway, et cetera. So it does feel like that's the kind of investment that if they just, they hire the Dolces and the George Lockharts and say, look, we're going to assign you these people, like an NBA team assigns a trainer to help with the team or an NFL team, and this person is going to monitor you for the next, 3-4 days.
That'd be
I agree. I mean, they should be. I mean, there's something logically like that you could do that would at least.
So it's come from somewhere. It's gotten better, but I feel like there's a lot more that can be done.
Yeah,
personally. Okay.
It's a tricky one, man. I mean, you go through it round and round and round. There's not a perfect way to do it, but I do feel like I would say, just to answer that question, that they're at least paying more attention, than they're doing more than they used to.
Yes. Okay, last but not least, here we go. This is a heavy one, my friends.
Oh boy, here we go.
The NFL's new national anthem rule causing so much controversy. Is it deserved, given the fact that other major sports leagues like the NBA have stricter rules regarding it? So, I'm not going to ask you guys to answer this question. What I am going to ask is, would you like to see the UFC adopt national anthems for main events? That's the question here. I'm completely driving past this question and saying, you know, in boxing they do this? They do it all the time. Do you like this?
Well, it's funny because every team in the NFL is American. I mean, you go, we're a global sport. It goes all over the globe. So are you doing national anthems?
Right, if you go to UFC Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I feel like
no,
it's
like UFC Liverpool. You play God Save the Queen, and then you play the Star Spangled Banner.
Where was that at? Was it Bellator?
Bellator,
and then also, did they do it at Mayweather and McGregor?
Yes, they did.
They did.
Yeah, you remember they had Demi Lovato.
That's right.
Yeah.
I would say that
it's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. It's such a moment. Like, there's so much momentum involved in a fight night. Like there's so much anticipation for a fight. It's a little weird to have it right before a main event. You'd almost rather it happen before the main card or something like that.
That's fair.
But I wouldn't be opposed to it. You know what I mean? Like it's paying respect. But I do think that you have a global. So you're always going to have 2 anthems at least, right? And then there's other fighters who, you know what I mean?
Although if you do it before the start of the main card, you just do it for the country that you're in. So if it was Chile, you do the Chilean
one.
Yeah?
I've been to actual like regional MMA scenes where they've done the national anthem.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the U.S.?
Yeah, in the U.S. in Florida. And Fight Time Promotions, to be exact. And it does feel nice. It feels like more of an event when you see, like these football games or anything, any other sports. Like it does, make it feel more of an event. But again, that's an American thing. So I guess if you would, I don't know, do different national anthems, I don't know how that would work. But I don't know.
And then imagine a fighter decides not to stand for it. And you got that controversy.
You got that controversy, and there's so many international fighters. Like UFC Chile was a Chilean card, but there was 3 Peruvians fighting on the card. You know, Mexicans.
It's funny with ESPN, you know, bringing over the UFC, and because I always look at UFC or MMA in general is just kind of happily anti-PC sphere. Like people show up here, they can kind of get by with a lot more, they can say a lot more. ESPN has always been a little more guarded in that sense, and I feel like that's why the two are not really, they don't really mesh, but it's still a fun prospect for fans to have to contemplate, because we saw it with Nate Diaz, like, you know, lighting up a spliff, you know, and stuff like that. It's going to be really fun to see, like, what happens on these main
Maybe they say
ESPN
out
cards.
with the rankings, in with the anthem. Probably not.
Nice steer back.
Yes.
Yeah, I would take that trade off.
It definitely make their lives a lot easier.
Yeah.
They being the matchmakers. Bellator has played the Israeli national anthem when they were in Tel Aviv, and it's pretty damn cool because everyone's singing it and stuff.
Really?
So yeah, at the beginning of the card, I agree with you. Maybe before the main event, like you kind of just want to get the thing started. But maybe before the card, or at least the main card, you do it for the country. Like if they played the English national anthem on Sunday, I wouldn't be upset about that.
No. I mean, it would be, as long as it's uniform, they're just paying homage to where they're at.
Sure,
They're not trying to, like, you know, cover a bunch of bases. And you're like, all right, that makes sense
It gets
to me.
a little much when they play 2, 3 of them.
It's also nice for the crowd, the host crowd.
I think so, especially if they're going to a place for the first time. So, all right. That does it for us. Thank you very much to everyone who sent in their questions. We appreciate it very much. Again, fun weekend coming up. Bellator on Friday, UFC on Sunday. And if you're a football fan, Danny says go with Liverpool, right?
Liverpool.
Yep.
Who's the favorite betting wise?
I think they're actually pretty close.
Really?
I haven't checked recently the
odds.
The odds, but I have to say, like, Liverpool's probably an underdog, but I think they're actually closer than what people.
Okay, there you have it.
Easy money.
Yes, we are out of time. Thanks to all who tuned in. Thanks to all who sent in questions. For the crew, for Danny, for Chuck. I am Ariel. Again, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the fights and enjoy your weekend.